This is the Outback QB Daily Weekend Edition. I'm Curtis DuBois. Doss is with me, and we are talking QB battles for 2024. Let's get into it. Hello, Doss. A couple of features for you on the Outback QB Daily in week one of operations.
Howdy, Curt. How you doing?
Very well, my friend. You've snuck away. You found some time for us. So it's a Saturday episode. Just a note on the weekend episodes. We'll put these out, and they won't necessarily be current affairs as in headlines and news items. If there are a few things that bank up over the weekend, we'll address them Monday mornings. So don't worry. If there's a couple of things that we're not talking about that may have just happened in the NFL world, we will get to them ASAP on the Daily Show. But today we are talking something that is quite time sensitive because we just found out yesterday that Drake Maye will not be starting for the Pats. In fact, it's Jacoby Brissett. So, Doss, we've identified 5 interesting QB, well, maybe they're not battles, but QB scenarios where one or the other may start the season and the opponent may end the season in their place. So we'll discuss them. Let's start with the Pats. Jacoby Brissett's been named by Drake Maye as the starter. I was a bit surprised by that, only because he teased us for 24 hours and said, we're announcing it tomorrow, and I thought that meant, oh, okay, they're going to do something more exciting than Brissett, which is what we thought previously. But no, it is Jacoby Brissett. So there's nothing really on this depth chart. They're a 4-win team last year. Smart to rest Drake Maye and just sit him and let him develop, Doss?
Very smart decision, Curt. Look, their O-line in New England is utterly horrendous. And we saw Brissett get banged up in the last preseason game against Washington. He went out of the game. Drake Maye, head coach, said he potentially would have played out the game or come back in had it been a regular season game. But that offensive line this season is not going to give Brissett or Maye any sort of support for early down plays. It's going to be third and long all the time. So then you have to ask yourself, new offensive coordinator as well with Alex Van Pelt coming across from the Browns after 4 seasons, why would you want to put Drake Maye out there, with a weak O-line in front of him and a pretty poor skilled position group, probably the worst in the NFL.
Yeah, I think so.
The Pats offensive line last year, for context, they were last in the NFL for pass block win rate, and they were 22nd per EPA in rush attempts. So they had plenty of cap room to address this in the off season. They made a couple of signings, but nothing of note, and we've already seen in the preseason games and in camp to suggest that offensive line isn't going to get any better. I guess the fuel to the fire, or what fueled some speculation, Curt, was Drake Maye coming out saying Maye has outplayed Jacoby Brissett in the preseason, which he had.
That was the other
part. So that sort of then raised some eyebrows, because I always thought Brissett would start. And I think Hawley was, and reading a lot of what was coming out of New England was that Brissett would be the week 1 starter. It had only been that sort of last week where Drake Maye probably played more than what we thought he would in that last preseason game and played pretty well. And that I think had raised some speculation, but I would not play Drake Maye. I'm really hesitant to see if they really want to play him at all this season. You might get a couple of games towards the back end of the season, maybe, but man, I don't know if you really want to put what you believe could be your next franchise quarterback out there with just such poor protection.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the smart thing, but I think it's going to be hard for them to resist. If Brissett's struggling, if they're 0-4 and the fans are banging down the door, give us your prediction, Doss. I normally go a bit early on these things, so I was going to say week 4. I'm going to push it back by 2 weeks. I think week 6 will see Drake Maye. What's your guess?
No, I think it'll be around Thanksgiving, so that puts it at about week 11.
Okay.
I think it'll be once well and truly the Patriots are out of some sort of contention. I think they'll get a bit of juice and a bit of spark from their defense in the first 4 to 6 weeks, but once that defense, who I think is going to be on the field a lot this season, starts to wear, especially as we get through the middle part of the season, I think that's when they may look to sit Brissett and have a look at Drake Maye for starting a game,
All right, let's rattle through a few other teams quickly. We've got the Cleveland situation. Deshaun Watson Jameis Winston and Dorian Thompson-Robinson stays as the third. Tyler Huntley's been let go. So Watson, in his 2 years at the Browns, he's played 12 out of a possible 34 games, 14 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, 2,200 yards. That's it. That's all he's produced. And it's starting to become time where if he produces nothing this year in year 3 and he's either injured or just can't play, which he hasn't been able to any good level recently, then you have to start thinking what's next. So this is the year, I think, for Deshaun Watson. And could we see, I mean, they've restructured his contract. We won't go into those details, but they shuffled a bit of money around.
Oh, I thought we were going to get into some contract talk.
No, not today, Doss. I know how much you love it, but not today.
That's all right.
But if he's fit this year, I think they'll play him all year, unless he's a bottom 5 quarterback all year, which he was close to last year. But if he's fit, he plays all year. However, if there's injury problems, they're going to really see what they have in Jameis Winston, I think, because they've just got to keep their eye open for another alternative, don't they?
It's interesting you say that because Jameis Winston was reportedly on the trade block as of this week.
Well, that's what I thought, and then they cut Huntley, so Winston stays too. I'm confused.
Yeah. And you referred to Watson, the 12 games in 2 seasons, but it's 12 in 3 because he had that year off. So
yeah, although he wasn't technically part of the Browns then, but I take your point. As far as his experience, 12 in 3 games, you're right.
But yeah, I mean, the last time we saw Deshaun Watson play any sort of good, consistent quarterback football was in 2020, 4 years ago.
Yep.
So,
and that was in front of no crowd.
Yeah, that's right. And that was when no one was allowed to go to the game. So we saw Dorian Thompson-Robinson last year. We saw that experiment. Wasn't great. They cycled through Flacco as well last season. So
Flacco was their best quarterback by far, including Deshaun Watson last year.
Yeah, and now he's with Indianapolis. I think he's back, behind Anthony Richardson there in Indy. So, look, they've invested in Watson. They've restructured his contract to, add an extra couple of void years on the end. So I think watch that space as we get closer to the trade deadline. Why they made that restructuring, and it'll be to add more pieces and to help Deshaun Watson. That's what I believe, because I think Watson, provided he's healthy, to your first point, will be the quarterback for the whole season.
He's got to be. It's just that it's been so terrible so far. So
it has been like the last 2 seasons for qualifying quarterbacks. Per EPA, he's 39th or 41st, I think, out of 44 quarterbacks. Zach Wilson and Bryce Young and guys that have been constantly mocked for their quarterback play and for their lack of efficiency are ahead of Deshaun Watson. He had maybe that one good game against the Ravens last season where he got injured, and that was really the only sort of positive game we saw last season from Deshaun Watson. So interesting situation for the Browns, but again, unless he isn't healthy, I think they'll have to play him the whole season, because what's behind him, I don't think you're going to get anything better.
No. And what makes it worse is that this defense is ready to win a championship, and they were last year, and their offense was nowhere near it. Pittsburgh. Russell Wilson's been named the starter, much to my chagrin. Justin Fields backs him up. Can he hold Fields off? Can Russell Wilson hold Fields off for the whole year? Does he last the year, in your opinion? Does he have a good year? Or what's the scenario there?
This is one where I don't even think the Steelers front office and Mike Tomlin know where this is going to go now.
I think you're right.
That's my gut feel, because we know Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator, who has a good record as an OC in his 2 years in Tennessee before he was head coach in Atlanta. Last year, the Falcons were 3rd in rush attempts, but they were 25th in efficiency. So you can be sure that he will look to run the ball down the throat of the opposition with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren there in Pittsburgh, because the wide receiver room is so thin. And you got to also remember, with Russ and Justin Fields, their previous 2 teams didn't want them. And there is a reason for that. Now, there are different circumstances at each one, but neither of them really played to a starting quarterback level in terms of any sort of efficiency over their last 2 seasons. And the Steelers last year were 15th in offensive efficiency, which staggered me when I was looking this up, because they had Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and then Mason Rudolph at quarterback.
Yeah,
so
wow.
if they can get some sort of competent play out of Russ, in an offense where in Denver last year they were 19th in efficiency and he looked pretty ordinary for most of the season, apart from a little stretch there where he, played, had some short passes and a bit of junk time at the end of games. I think he holds. It'll only be if the offense looks completely anemic and they fall probably a couple of games below 500, Curt, where I could then see them go, all right, let's try the dual threat explosive option that Justin Fields could potentially bring to this offense, which Arthur Smith will love because he will get Fields to run.
Yep, that's a fair statement. I'm not giving up hope. I'm putting week 12 on a Justin Fields start because I just can't. I can't.
Which is around the Thanksgiving mark, and that's about the point where you sort of start to look at teams, and teams either go one way or they start to head down. You can generally tell by about that mark, with about 5 or 6 weeks left in the season, on how a team looks.
All right, 2 teams to go. New Orleans, an interesting one. We haven't talked much about the Saints this offseason, but 33-year-old Derek Carr is their quarterback, Jake Hayner and Spencer Rattler, who we have talked about a little bit, a decent preseason from him. I wonder, have I been harsh on Derek Carr in my assessment? He's got some very good attributes in that in the last 10 years he's only missed 4 regular season games, which is incredible durability. 25 touchdowns to 8 interceptions last year, passer rating of 97. As the lights go out on... The lights have gone out on Doss. That might be reflective of his feelings on the Saints' prospects this year.
Yeah.
25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 97 passer rating, 9-8 record. But it didn't look that good. I mean, those stats don't sound bad, but watching him, it just didn't look and feel good, with the exception of a couple of games late. So, am I harsh on Carr, or is he a real candidate to lose his job to someone like... I mean, I'm not thinking Jake Hayner. I'm thinking Spencer Rattler late in the year. Again, that Thanksgiving mark, maybe later, maybe a week 14, 15, just an experiment.
I think you know what you're always going to get with Derek Carr, Curt. Like, it's going to be competent quarterback play.
With a ceiling.
If you were to do you know his ceiling. The floor is what it is. Just looking, if you were to do your quarterback tier or rankings, most people would have Derek Carr, I would say, somewhere around the 15 to 18 mark, I would say, sort of middle of the pack.
Maybe a nudge lower, yeah.
Depending
20, depending on who you are.
Yeah, probably somewhere around there, depending upon your preferences, right? I don't think the Saints will actually be as bad to the point where Carr will get replaced as starter. That's my theory. And, they've got Clint Kubiak coming in now as their offensive coordinator, who comes out of the Kyle Shanahan tree out of San Francisco. We like Chris Olave, who will clearly be the number one option. Rashid Shaheed, he's a nice receiver, but Alvin Kamara just hasn't produced the numbers that we saw in 2020, and he's coming into his 8th season. And the thing that hurts the Saints the most on offense is their offensive line. And you've mentioned it, Curt. You've spoken about Trevor Penning at right tackle before, and what a disappointment that has been. They drafted Talisi Fuaga, who's they're hoping to be their starting left tackle with their first-round pick in the draft just gone. Look, I think the Saints are going to be, again, pretty much as they were last year. It'll be close, dull, low-scoring games between, sort of that 17 to 14,
Get 21,
excited. 20 to 17 type of games where it'll come down to some defensive plays. It'll really come down to, can Derek Carr not turn the ball over? And if he doesn't turn the ball over, I think they'll somewhat be efficient enough on offense that they'll win enough games and they'll push to be on the edge of that wild card in the NFC. But I wouldn't have them any better than basically what they were last year, which was 8-9 or 9-8. I think they'll still be around that mark.
And that wild card mark, that's the pass mark for Dennis Allen. If he doesn't make at least a wild card round, if they don't make playoffs, he's done.
Oh, 100%. I'm surprised he survived last year.
He's your favourite. He's your boy. Seattle.
Not my
Finally.
boy.
Another 33-year-old quarterback, but a very different one. Geno Smith. Slightly down last year, but not awful. The year before he was very good. He just had a very middling year last year. The question here, and I think we differ on this answer, is Sam Howell competition? To me, I think he is, because they don't want to waste DK Metcalf. They don't want to waste early JSN as he develops, and they certainly don't want to waste the last year or two of Tyler Lockett's, because this is a threesome that could be quite effective if it all clicks. So do you think Gino's in any kind of trouble if he plays like he did last year, or would they see him out at that level of form?
No, I think the Seahawks still won 9 games last year, Kurt, and I said a couple of weeks ago, I think they underperformed with the resources that they have.
Yeah.
And they bring in a new OC, Ryan Grubb, who replaces Shane Waldron, who's gone to the Bears. And Waldron last year, very hesitant to use the passing game and throw, have Geno Smith throw the ball downfield, which is why we were probably disappointed with the low usage rate of JSN and Tyler Lockett, and even DK Metcalf. We were wondering in some games where is this production? He'll have a game against Dallas where he'll have 3 touchdowns and 140 yards or 150 yards, and then the next week will be barely any targets and 30 or 50, 60 yards. So I think that'll change this season. I think Geno, to me, I don't think his job is in any sort of danger, because I believe that the foundation and core pieces are there for the Seahawks to have a pretty positive season. Their O-line is a weakness, but if their tackles are healthy and improved, they had some injury worries. They lost a couple of starters very early on in the season last year, which hurt them, and they never really recovered, and that also hurt their running game a bit when they're quite dynamic with Kenny Walker, and I don't mind Zach Charbonnet as well. And I just think with Mike McDonald coming in as head coach, it's a breath of fresh air replacing Pete Carroll, who had been there for such a long time. And while Pete Carroll was more defensive oriented, he very much had full control over the play calling on offense as well, or would override play calling on offense, and would tend to lean more to the run game as opposed to the passer game, which hurt Geno from the previous year in 2022, where he threw the ball a lot more and they saw a lot more success and obviously made the wild card game. So I think that's what I'm expecting to see from Geno Smith and the Seattle offense this year. A lot more dynamic use of weapons, use of production, and they should be much more efficient. And that's why I think Geno Smith will retain his starting role. And he's also playing for a new contract. He wants another extension and stay in Seattle. And I think the franchise would be pretty keen if they... you never know what happens in this division. There's question marks over the 49ers, maybe around their health over them. The Rams as well haven't had an ideal preseason. And Arizona are, most people have them somewhere between that 6 to 8 win mark. So I think this division is quite wide open. I think Seattle have a chance to, if not win the division, certainly push for a wild card as they did 2 years ago.
Very comprehensive, Dos. I like that. I can't argue with anything that you've said. The one thing I will point out when talking about dynamic and going for it and using weapons, that's the Sam Howell style as well. So if Geno does happen to get injured or sat for whatever reason, whatever we see from Sam Howell, we know it will be entertaining, good, bad, or otherwise. So I like watching him play because it can be it's like Jameis Winston sort of stuff.
Well, it is. I guess the only issue I had with Sam Howell is he kept throwing the ball over my boy Scary Terry last year, and I was just getting frustrated. I will not forget him, because it cost Washington games last year when McLaurin is open, throw him the ball, and he threw it 10 yards over his head, or he threw it out of bounds. And my main issue with Sam Howell is he just takes too many sacks, and that hurt Washington last season. He looked really good, and I was really bullish on him when he led that comeback against Denver at Mile High. I think it was in about week 2 or week 3 last year, and we thought this is Sam Howell's time is now, and this was a career-defining win. And unfortunately, from that moment on, it just never. Apart from a few pretty good games against Philadelphia, they lost those games, but it pushed them. Outside of that, there wasn't a lot of efficient play from Sam Howell. He just took too many sacks, and his decision-making just wasn't quick enough, unfortunately. So hopefully that'll change for him, but I don't think he will get a start in Seattle this year unless Geno gets injured.
All right, we will watch with interest. There are 5 QB situations that we are looking at for this year. We'll see you all tomorrow. We're ranking the head coaches, top 5 head coaches, OCs and DCs in tomorrow's episode. We recorded that a couple of weeks ago, but enjoy that tomorrow for your listening pleasure. Thank you, Dos. We'll see you on the show again soon.
Thanks, Curt. Always a pleasure. Bye, guys.